Welcome to Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I am the founder of Teach the Geek. It's an online platform for science and engineering professionals. The first offering of the platform is a public speaking course called Teach the Geek to Speak. To learn more about it, you can go to teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Today, my guest is Raven Baxter. She is a college science teacher, a molecular scientist, and doctoral researcher. Quite a lot of stuff. She's also a public speaker, and she's eager to spread the message of inclusivity in STEM. I'm interested to find out more about what her work entails, what her doctoral research is on, and public speaking, of course. Welcome to Teach the Geek interviews, Raven.
Thanks, Neil, for having me. I appreciate it.
So I did a little bit of research on you, Raven, and I saw that you studied biology in school. Where did that interest come from?
Well, I've always loved science. When I was a kid, I used to love watching the Weather Channel, and
really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm a real geek. I'm a real hero. I loved meteorology, and I would read encyclopedias and things like that. And I eventually went to space camp. And then that's where I figured out, I'm afraid of heights. Definitely can't be an astronaut because that would be my worst nightmare. So I turned my sights back to Earth and fell in love with biology, specifically like genetics. I'm bilingual, and genetics seemed like a third language to me. So I was really interested in pursuing that. And then I just really kind of just took off from there. I never really looked back.
What's the other language you speak?
Spanish.
Oh, wow, that's pretty cool. I took a Spanish class when I was in 10th grade, and I never did Spanish ever again after that. I'm kind of regretting it now that I live in California. It probably came in handy.
Sure, it comes in handy in California.
Yeah, for sure. Just even going to a Jack in the Box and ordering food, I could do that real easy. So, I mentioned in the intro that you teach. So how'd you get into teaching?
Well, I've been teaching for a long time. Like even when I was in high school, I taught Sunday school. I was a Sunday school teacher, and I found out that I really like teaching. So I kind of just kept that in the back burner. When I was younger, I didn't really realize that if you like teaching, you didn't have to be like a K-12 teacher. So I pursued science, and I eventually, when I got to grad school, I became a TA, and then I realized, like teaching college is really my speed. I really like teaching at that level. The students are often like way more mature, and they want to be there. Most of them are paying to be there, unfortunately. So, usually they show really a lot of interest in the class, and that's a really good, teaching in that environment is really nice because students are usually very motivated. So yeah, I really love teaching.
And then, I also mentioned in the intro that you're a molecular scientist. What exactly does that mean?
Yes. So as I said before, when I was talking about my love for genetics, molecular science is really, usually people call it cell and molecular biology because it's the study of cells and everything that happens inside of cells to make cells work. So when you go beneath the cellular level, we call that the molecular level or the subcellular level. And it's the study of molecules, how, proteins, biomolecules, things like that. It's the study of those things, antibodies, those things.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that sounds pretty interesting. So, you also mentioned, I also mentioned that you're pursuing a PhD. What was your motivation to pursue a PhD?
Okay. Good question. So, I had a job in corporate science. I was a corporate drug discovery researcher. So basically, big pharmaceutical companies who make all of the medicines that we take today, they contract out small organizations to carry out parts of the research. So maybe their big project is, I want to create a drug that helps with this cancer. So they would be like, okay, but I want this business to figure out how this part of the drug works. And then you report back to us so we can get on with our big project. So I was a part of that little company that would make those little breakthroughs to help big companies. And you can have that kind of job with a master's degree or a bachelor's degree in biology. But what I figured was that I didn't quite like the corporate environment. And I really felt like I was being called to go back into education, and to do what I really want to do in the education space. You need a PhD. So I decided to go to school, not for a biology PhD, but for a science education PhD. And I think it's definitely a perfect fit for me.
What about the corporate environment did you not like?
Well, I will say that I think that science culture has a long way to go as far as creating welcoming and inclusive environments for minorities. And I really didn't feel like we had that where I was working. Not to say that they didn't make efforts, but I had a few experiences that really were uncomfortable. So I just kind of decided to leave and really just give back to my community. And those experiences are what motivated me to kind of turn around and start changing science culture and creating those inclusive environments.
Oh, okay. So when it comes to getting a PhD in science education, what exactly does that entail?
Well, I'm really fortunate to be in an interdisciplinary program, which means that if you have an idea, you can kind of just go anywhere you want with it as long as it relates to the core competencies of the program. So my PhD is in science education, but I'm actually studying, you didn't really touch on this yet, but I make science-themed rap music, and I released it on the internet, and it's been there's been a global response to my music. And I'm studying those responses. I've had the opportunity to interview 30 people and study their responses, and those responses are going to be the core components of my dissertation, which I will be finished with in the fall. Oh, so that's what I'm studying. It's called, it's a study on science identity in adults.
Interesting. What prompted you to even put, I guess, a science-themed rap song or music together?
That's a good question. So, going back to my experiences as a corporate scientist, I really came away with a feeling of, wow, I experienced something that really made me uncomfortable. What would make me feel better? Like, what is something that would make me feel better? Because you can either sit with those feelings and then just be like, wow, that really sucked, or you can kind of turn it around and flip it and make it a positive. So I ended up just kind of writing down how I felt. And I've been writing music for a long time, since I was in high school, and I've been making music. So naturally, my written thoughts turned into a song. I've been making beats since high school. I made the beat for the song, and it turned into a song. And the lyrics are all science themed, and if you listen closely and you kind of dissect the lyrics, which I'll be doing in a few weeks with one of my writing partners, you'll hear a narrative of my experience in STEM and kind of like words of empowerment and encouragement for other women in STEM. And so that was a product of my corporate experience. And I ended up making music videos to my songs, and I made sure that I featured Black women in my videos, and really all types of women in my videos, just having a good time and showing people that they can really, even though science culture hasn't really been made for us, we still should feel comfortable being ourselves and expressing ourselves in our own individual ways. So I make sure that that's seen in my videos as well. So yeah, all of my work as far as science music has been a product of my experience in corporate.
What do you hope to do with your PhD once you've completed it?
That's a really great question. I don't have an answer for that. And I am definitely somebody who has kind of lived by the motto, everything happens for a reason. And I found that I've had plans in the past and even greater things have happened. So I try not to plan too much and say, oh, this is what I'm going to do. But I definitely want to continue the work that I'm doing right now in my science communication outreach and just creating communities where people can just feel welcome in science culture.
Every time you say that's a good question, it makes me think that the questions that you didn't say that's a good question for weren't very good questions.
Oh, that's not true. I think that's just my knee-jerk response.
It's like that was a good question, but that one before that was a stinker.
So to anything you say, apparently.
So you had said that you have these poor experiences in corporate America, and now you're doing a PhD. What would the environment need to be for you to return to corporate?
That's really, I'm not going to say it's a good question. That's honestly, it's because it makes me think. And I'm not sure if I have all of the answers to that question right now, but I definitely can say that one of the saddest things about my experience was that I just felt invisible. My lab was mostly women, contrary to popular belief that there's a lack of women in science. My work environment was almost 100% women at my level. At the senior level, of course, there were men who were the managers and things like that, that's a whole other conversation. But I was in an office full of women, and we all have that one thing in common. But still, I was the only Black person in the entire building besides the janitor and the security guard. And I was the scientist. And, it just said a lot to me because every day I would walk in the office and the janitor, and the security guard would acknowledge me. They would be so proud. They were so proud that I was there. And I would walk into my office and no one would talk to me. Like I was invisible to them. And I would try to make efforts to make friends. Like I would bring in snacks. I'm a really pleasant person to talk to. I love to have fun. No one really cared to make bonds with me unless it was directly related to our research. If we were on the same team working on a project and they had to communicate with me, the communication was there. But otherwise, if it was like, hey, let's grab some lunch, or, how's your day going, or something like that, it wasn't there. And that's, feeling accepted, having a sense of belonging is a basic human need. And that's something that a lot of people don't get, especially in the STEM workforce when you're the only Black person there. It's really common for you to just be like off to the side, an afterthought. There was a ton of things that happened. The list could go on, but I think what really needs to happen is a genuine inclusion effort, like training. If there is really a care about getting minorities into STEM and retaining them in the STEM field, I think that these companies really have to look at training for inclusivity and diversity, implicit bias training, things like that need to be had like from the get-go.
Just listening to your experience and the idea of not or of being invisible and people not really bringing in snacks and people not acknowledging it or asking you to lunch, is that the type of thing that I guess that would that would have helped in you staying in corporate America, or just people just being nicer to you and just extending an olive branch, I guess?
Honestly, yeah. And you have to think about when you take a job like that, no one really wants to leave. Like that was a career move for me. I didn't plan on leaving that company. The company was very promising. I was working hard, but when you think about somewhere you want to be long term, you really have to make sure that you're in a place where you're going to be happy, because scientists work long hours. We work in very intimate, close settings on teams. And when you encounter loneliness like that on a daily basis, it can be very toxic. So I had to make the decision, I can't change people. If I'm invisible to you, then I'm just invisible, right? But that experience really motivated me to just kind of do a 180 and turn around and make it better for the next generation and start cultivating these communities where people can get the skills they need to feel to survive that kind of environment.
Well, I know you'd mentioned potential training that people could go to foster this a culture of belonging. What would, in your opinion, what would this training need to encompass so that someone like you would have been felt more welcome at the companies you were at?
Well,
That's a good question.
Yes, and you said it.
I was waiting for it, and you didn't say it this time.
That's great questions. That is great.
There you go.
Good. I think I am not experienced enough and well versed enough in like diversity trainings to answer this question fully, but I have had implicit bias training, which was very eye-opening for not only myself but everyone else in the room. And it really helped everyone to just understand that everyone has a bias. I have a bias. You have a bias. Everyone has preconceived notions of every single thing, that they've and may have encountered before. So I think that that's a good place to start from my knowledge base. I'm sure that there's other exercises, other trainings that we can have, but I feel like that must be a mandatory part of the onboarding process for any scientist. Implicit bias training, whatever other types of trainings there are, I think it has to be a part of the onboarding process. And I think that just as we have requirements for academics to submit diversity statements with their applications for positions, we should start having diversity statements for more types of positions, especially in STEM, where we see a huge discrepancy, in representation. We want to make sure we're hiring people who understand or have some sort of commitment to diversity, some sort of respect for diversity initiatives, and not just people who are completely unaware of the need for diversity.
Yeah, I'd be curious to find out what that diversity statement would say.
Yeah, I want to read them.
I also mentioned that you do a lot of speaking. Have you always been effective in public speaking? And if not, what have you done to get better at it?
I think I've always been a good speaker. I do recall a time when I was a nervous speaker, and that was really in my youth before I had done much speaking. And I think what makes me a good public speaker is just being very human and understanding that whoever I'm speaking to is most likely a human, because I'm not Dr. Dolittle. Can't talk to animals. So once you kind of just remember we're all human, and I'm just up here talking to a bunch of other humans about whatever I'm thinking about, it just becomes a more relaxed experience. And also, this is something I tell my students, to just stop worrying about titles. A lot of the students that I taught and advised they're very intimidated talking to professors, talking to people in authority. And I have to just remind them, circle of life. Like one day you're probably going to be a professor, and I'm going to be in a nursing home and and then there's going to be somebody who's afraid to talk to you. You have to understand that the only difference between me and you is a few years and a couple degrees, and that's it. And you might get there one day. And even if you don't, we're still both human. So no matter who you're talking to in front of, just being very humble and human I think that's made me a good public speaker.
That's excellent advice that you offer, Raven, about not being scared to speak to people just based on their title or their position. And I firmly believe that, just in the Black community in general, I'll speak on that because I know it well because, I think for obvious reasons. But, speaking in that community in general, I think that's a lot of our issues a lot of times is we feel intimidated speaking to people that are in these positions. And you can't, it's really difficult to move ahead when you don't speak to those people, because oftentimes they know things that could very well benefit us. But if we don't speak to them, then we don't get that knowledge.
Absolutely. That is so true.
Yeah. So when it comes to the speaking that you do, what's the topics that you typically speak on?
Okay. So I have 4 speaking topics. And one of my speaking topics is about creating culturally responsive classrooms or learning environments, I should say. Another one of my speaking topics is on my journey. I dropped out of college at 16 or 17 rather, and then I got my PhD at 26. So, within those 10 years, I came a long way, and I talk about my journey finding resiliency in my STEM career. And I also talk about my research in science identity and why representation of Black women in STEM is impactful for everyone. And I also give talks on how to incorporate hip hop pedagogy in the classroom.
I know from that first topic, you mentioned creating culturally responsive classrooms. What exactly does that mean, culturally responsive?
So culturally responsive comes from culturally relevant pedagogy, which was, it's basically bringing the classroom into the culture versus bringing the culture into the classroom. So being super immersive about understanding students' cultural backgrounds and not making it a piece of the puzzle, but making it the whole puzzle itself. Like everything that's done in the classroom is relevant to really personalized to the demographic that you're teaching. And I strongly believe that that's an effective way to teach. And I use that in my teaching practices.
Interesting. Oh, what exactly would that look like? Just can you provide perhaps an example?
Sure. So the way that I do it, so as a professor, from day one, I established like a family feel from my classroom. A lot of people come away from my class feeling like we're family after the semester's over and they're sad to leave. It's like one of those things, like you've been at camp and you meet all these friends. But the reason why I do that is because I want people to treat each other like their family. I want everyone to try hard to learn about each other. So on the first day, I ask, even if it's 100 people in my class, I ask each and every single one person in the classroom to share something about themselves, and we have like a short dialogue. It's for the whole class to hear. Someone can say, "Hey, my name's Ben, and I'm from California. I have a mom. I like to play hockey," and like I'll try to pick one thing that each person says and find a relationship with them. So Ben likes hockey. Oh, I'm from Buffalo. We have a hockey team, the Buffalo Sabres. Like how's hockey in California? Stuff like that. And you'd be so surprised how far that goes with students. Just little things like that. And then remembering, I try to take notes. Remembering throughout the semester, hey, Ben likes hockey. Or like, relating things back to the student, to whatever culture they identify with, and also leaving room for students to continuously identify themselves throughout the course of the semester. And customizing my teaching, I never teach the same course any semester. I customize every lecture to whatever students are in the classroom. So, if I'm talking about historical figures, I try to pull historical figures that the students will identify with based on what they shared. Or when we're talking about health issues, if like I've had a class where I had a ton of like Latino students, Latinos have a high rate of obesity and diabetes. You know, I try to relate statistics that they can relate to and understand, and it just goes a long way. That's what culturally relevant teaching can look like. But there's so many examples of that.
Wow. It sounds like in your classroom, you're developing the environment that you wish had existed at the company that you worked at.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah,
And it makes a difference. Like, students will always tell me I've never had anybody who really cared about me, you know. Science lectures can be really dry, and not a lot of people take the time to go the extra mile and make students feel included. It's so easy to just get up and just regurgitate information and get your money and go home. It's so easy to do that. And it just takes somebody who really cares to really make a meaningful experience for a student.
Well, you know what? If the students haven't said it, I commend you for going that extra mile in trying to make science more palatable it's interesting to the students that you teach.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So when it comes to the engagements or the speaking that you do you have a process for putting your presentations together? And if so, what is it?
Well, I like to make an outline, and but before I make the outline, I like to do an analysis of what do I really want them to go home and think about after the talk is over, and what are the takeaways? Like, are we going to make an action plan? Are we going to make a craft? Are we going to do something hands-on? What is going to be the takeaway? Are they going to have homework to do? Are we going to see each other again? Things like that. So I definitely try to outline the product of the talk. And then I make the outline. What is the story that I want to tell, or what are the skills that I want to teach, and make sure that all of those points are hit throughout the talk. And always give opportunities for people to ask questions and engage in dialogue. Because again, it's really easy to just get up there and bark at people and get your money and go home. But creating that community is really important.
Yeah, for sure. So this has all been really interesting, and I know I said this would be 30 minutes or less, so I really want to be mindful of your time. Is there anything else that you'd like to add about things that you're working on?
Oh, anything else that I'm working on? Well, yes. So I am currently hosting a talk show, science talk show. It's called the STEMbassy. STEMbassy, like embassy.
Okay.
And every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I host 3 other scientists, and we talk about current events in STEM. We also talk about topics that these scientists are passionate about. And we play games, we have trivia, and we give prizes to the audience members who are tuning in to the live stream. And we have so much fun. We laugh. We think, we come up with solutions, we take action, and I really enjoy it. So that's the STEMbassy. You can follow STEMbassy on Instagram, or you can follow me. I'm Raven the Science Maven on Instagram, and tune in.
Wonderful. So those are the best avenues to get in touch with you. On Instagram.
Yes, or you could go to my website, scimaven.com, SCIMAVEN.com. I'm also on Facebook, Raven the Science Maven. I'm on Twitter, not as active on Twitter, but I'm working on it. It's Raven Sci Maven on Twitter. And that'd be it.
Wonderful. Well, everyone, that marks the end of another episode of Teach the Geek Interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I am the founder of Teach the Geek. It's an online platform for science and engineering professionals. The first offering of the platform is a public speaking course called Teach the Geek to Speak. To learn more about it, you can go to teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Until next time, take care. Thanks, Raven.